All right, welcome everyone to this meeting of SABR's East Coast Cooperative, a group of 7 chapters in Eastern Canada and the United States who are working together to bring you more great presentations. I'm Bruce McClure, the chapter chair of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter in Maine and New Hampshire. And tonight we have another great speaker for you. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to give a warm welcome to members of the New York Giants Preservation Society who have joined us this evening. Gary Mintz is the head of that group and graciously shared the invitation to them, and we're thrilled that you could join us this evening. If you're not a member of SABR, contact me and I can help you understand a little bit more about our organization. Now, before we get started, let's give you a little hint about what this presentation is going to be about. Donna, you're welcome. All right, now for our feature presentation. When the National League approved the relocation of the New York Giants to San Francisco in 1958, the Bay Area's metropolitan region's economic base was its status as a major seaport. The primary locally produced exports weren't technological, but agricultural. In the late 60s, when the KCAs moved into Oakland, the region had not yet sufficiently grown to support 2 major league teams. For many years, both struggled with attendance and each very nearly relocated. Not until the 1980s was the area's economic foundation ample for 2 franchises to thrive simultaneously. The region's growth was driven by a dramatically transformed economy. This presentation illuminates the dynamics behind the new courses that the Giants and A's were forced to chart to optimize attractiveness to Silicon Valley money and power. Steve Treder is the author of the Seymour Medal-winning biography, 40 Years a Giant, The Life of Horace Stoneham. He wrote a weekly column on baseball history for the Hardball Times for more than 10 years. He has presented his work many times at the Cooperstown Symposium, the 9 Conference, and the SABR National Convention, the one that just finished in Minneapolis. And when he grows up, if he ever does, he intends to play center field for the San Francisco Giants. Steve Treder, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Well, Bruce, my goodness, with that kind of a intro, I hope I don't let anybody down.
I don't think you will. It's all yours, man. Go get them.
Thank you, sir. And what a wonderful crew we've got here tonight. Phenomenal. What you all are. Hello, New York Giants Preservation Society folks. I'd love having you here. This is awesome. This is what SABR is so wonderful for, is that we could do something like this and just talk baseball for a couple of hours. Um, uh, some of you know me. I joined SABR in 1985, so I've been around a long time and been to a lot of these kind of meetings, and this is always something I love to do. I will be presenting. I'm going to share my screen here. We practiced it and everything, so it should work. There we are. You can see my screen, which is a PowerPoint presentation. What I'm going to be sharing with you here is exactly what I shared in Minneapolis in August. Same PowerPoint slides, and I have a little script that I'm going to read along with them. So it's exact same presentation, but I want to make sure you understand what this is. This presentation is kind of the core theme, or at least one of the core themes of a book that I'm writing right now, and I'm about 40% of the way complete with the first draft of it, which will be this story here, the story of the Giants and the A's in the Bay Area since 1958. But broader than that, the story of the Bay Area since 1958, in which the Giants and the A's are, only part of the community. And how everything has changed so much since the 50s and 60s, and what that impact has been on the teams and all that. That's what the book will be about. So I'll give you this presentation here, and then it'll take 15 minutes or something, and then let's just open it up for discussion about this particular more nugget kind of issues that I'm addressing here in the presentation, or just anything more broadly about the Giants and the A's in the San Francisco Bay Area. So before I get with that, just to give you some context of why this is what I'm working on. I'm a Bay Area guy. I was born in San Jose in 1958 interestingly, 1958. So I grew up in the South Bay in Santa Clara County through the 60s and 70s when everything changed from it being a orchard and farm community to the center of Silicon Valley. And it happened about like that. So I lived through it. It's my life. I've worked for decades in Silicon Valley, made my career there, lived my life there until a year and a half ago when my wife and I moved to Tucson, Arizona, where I am today, where it's 90 degrees today, by the way, in Tucson. It's still a little too hot. But other than this little tiny little snippet of my life, I lived my entire life in the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents were both raised in Oakland, and they were Oaks fans, and they were married in Oakland and lived in Oakland before I was born, before they moved to Santa Clara in 1948 as part of my dad was an electrical engineer. It all ties together with Silicon Valley, but Oakland is where both of my grandmothers lived, and I've got so much family, uh, uh, memories and everything of Oakland. So that's who I am. I'm an Oakland roots guy who grew up in Santa Clara and San Jose in Silicon Valley. So that's my sort of my perspective on all this. I've lived this story. And, of course, being a baseball nut since I was 5, was obsessed with the Giants. And I've always been a Giants fan, number one, but I'm not one of those people who doesn't like the A's. I love the A's. They're my number 2 team, Oakland, and so, I'm a Giants number 1 fan, but the A's are also my interest. So this is part of what I've spent most of my life uh, inhabiting. And they say you're supposed to write what you know, and so I know this, and so this is what I'm writing, and it's especially um, resonant, I think, because I've just moved out of state and I'm not living in the Bay Area anymore. And it's the first time in my life I'm seeing it from an outsider's perspective, and it's a helpful way to look at something like this. So I think I know the story, but of course, as I'm writing this and researching it, I realize I don't know nearly as much as I thought I knew, and I'm learning a ton of new things about it as I go. So um, please take this in the spirit in which I'm giving it. I'd love to hear your feedback and questions and stuff like that. So let's go ahead with this little presentation that I have. I can see that, and you can see. I'm gonna have to try to juggle 2 screens at once here. Sorry. Da, 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 da. You're okay. You're seeing my script is what you're seeing, right? And now you see the PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah, now I can see the PowerPoint.
The heck with the script. I know what the script says. I'm gonna ad lib the script, guys. We're just gonna wing it. So it'll be better anyway. It'll be better anyway. All right. So the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1950s and 60s, when the Giants were relocating across the country, there were really, in the 1950s, there were only 2 markets on the West Coast that were at all of major league size. One was Los Angeles, and the other one was the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the San Francisco Bay Area, there was one obviously major city. San Francisco was the biggest city in the Bay Area, the most famous, the most, economically affluent for every reason in the world. San Francisco was the one place you would go. And so that's where the Giants went. And the San Francisco Bay Area was affluent. It wasn't Los Angeles in terms of size or richness, but it was an affluent place. But it was not a big manufacturer of much technology. There was some machinery and stuff, but it wasn't a big producer of cars or airplanes or even ships. It was a port. It was a transport portal, and one of the biggest in the world, shipping goods out of the United States, shipping goods into the United States. And so that's what its economic basis was. There was no broader technology than that. The major export of the Bay Area in this era, here we go, was from the South Bay, was from the Santa Clara County, which was in those days the largest producer of orchard fruits in the world. In the world, it was that big and that successful. Cherries, apricots, prunes were the 3 big, but there's also walnuts and a bunch of other stuff. A very big agricultural producer. It was a beautiful place. The reason everything, grew like that because the valley floor was former seabed. It was this thick, dark, rich, sticky adobe clay soil, extremely fertile. The weather is perfect year round. It never gets too hot. It never gets too cold. There's a medium amount of rainfall. It's a perfect growing medium. And so it was a beautiful place. You can see this postcard here. I got a little glimpse of this when I was a kid. There was still little pockets of it you could see, but in springtime, when all of the fruit orchards were in blossom at the same time, the entire valley floor was a carpet of white blossoms. It was staggeringly beautiful. The valley was called the Valley of Heart's Delight, and it wasn't an ironic, thing to say. That it was a beautiful place. It was the Valley of Heart's Delight. It was a bucolic agricultural center. And it still was to a certain degree when I was a kid in the 60s. Although the change was already underway, there was still a long way to go before it stopped being an agricultural center. This picture here is a snapshot of a road that my dad would have gone to work on at this time, 1961 Lawrence Station Road. It's now Lawrence Expressway, but you can see in the background all of these orchards. That was Sunnyvale. This is the part of Silicon Valley. This is what it looked like as recently as the 60s. I'm old enough to remember a little bit when I was a kid, 8, 10 years old, in the late summertime, all the air outdoors stunk might be a better word, sweet, because all the fruit canners were canning all the fruit. And it was this heavy, sweet odor of like fruit cocktail was the way it was. And that was in the late 60s. So, it was still that way until remarkably recently before things changed so fast. So, that was that was Santa Clara County. Nobody was moving there. Nobody's moving any teams there or building any ballparks there. They built the ballparks where the population was. In San Francisco, first Candlestick Park opening in 1960, and then the Oakland Coliseum, which was opened in 1966, and then the A's moved there in 68. Both of these ballparks were of the most modern concept. They were publicly funded by the taxpayers, owned by the cities and counties for the purpose of attracting a major league tenant. And the ball clubs were just renting tenants. They didn't own the facilities. This is how it was done now in the 50s and 60s. Candlestick Park, of course, was botched from everything. The location was terrible. The construction was terrible. Everything about it was awful. And it became a real problem for the Giants from the day it opened. The Coliseum, on the other hand, was, it wasn't the best ballpark in the world, but it was a nice ballpark. Before Mount Davis was built, it was a very pleasant ballpark, easy to get to. It had all the attributes, all the positive attributes that Candlestick did. And the Oakland Coliseum was fine. There was never any issues with the Coliseum. This, meanwhile, was what was happening down in the South Bay. What had happened was World War II had happened. And in World War II, the United States engaged in a deadly serious race with Nazi Germany to build an atomic bomb. And the seriousness of that effort and what it took for the United States to gather the scientific knowledge and the technological capability to do that convinced the president and Congress and the military joint chiefs of staff, and everybody was in 100% agreement that we can never allow the United States to become second to any other nation in basic physics and electronics research. And as the Cold War, came into being following World War II, that urgency was even stronger than before. And so how do you make this happen? If the United States government, you fund basic research, you give research grants to universities. And there was no university in the country that was more eager and willing and taking this and transforming itself with it than Stanford University in Palo Alto. And Stanford became the center of cutting edge physics and electronics research in the late 1940s. It spawns a spin-off, the Stanford Research Park, which is the way Stanford, which owns the land, by the way, and makes profit off of every single stage in this process, of converting the basic research into applied products that can be developed and sold. And the primary customers in those days were military customers. The Silicon Valley was a military industrial complex project from the beginning, and still to a great extent that is not very well understood, still is. That meant that all those orchards, all those beautiful Valley of Hearts Delight orchards were bulldozed. And in their place were put tract homes. This one right here, Orchard Park, this was the tract that my parents bought a house in 1948. This is right down the street from our house. And so within a period of a very short time, within a couple of decades, it was completely transformed. And you can see here the metric of population that shows what I'm talking about. This one over here, this is 1960. This is about the time the Giants arrived. This bar here is San Francisco's population. This blue bar here, the one in the middle, this is Alameda County, which is Oakland, the East Bay. And the little one down here, this is Santa Clara County in 1960. By 1970, Santa Clara County, San Francisco, by the way, look at this. San Francisco never grows until very recently. San Francisco's population was as big in 1960 as ever going to get. Meanwhile, Alameda County, most of it not Oakland, by the way, but suburban Alameda County, grows and grows and grows. But what grows even faster than Alameda County is Santa Clara. Santa Clara just leapfrogs everything and becomes the largest county by population in the Bay Area, vastly larger than San Francisco. And if we're talking about wealth, economic clout, not just population, but dollars at the disposal to be spent by the population, this is how it looks. Santa Clara is by far the richest of the three major regions in the Bay Area. By far, it's as rich as San Francisco and Alameda combined, because of Silicon Valley, because that's what happened in Santa Clara County. As I mentioned, the root of all of this is the Cold War and the Department of Defense spending, and Stanford in particular. They did this as well, as a lot of you folks no doubt know this. The same thing happened in MIT and Harvard in the Massachusetts area, and that Massachusetts area became a research hub and a tech hub as well, but it wasn't anything close to the scale of what happened in Stanford and Silicon Valley. It was, maybe a third or a quarter as large, even through the 70s and 80s. So, this is what happens. Because of what Stanford has done in partnering with the Department of Defense, this is where Shockley founds the Semiconductor Laboratory, which is chartered with the task of developing a replacement for the vacuum tube, which it's finally Bob Noyce and Fairchild that invent that, because Shockley was a brilliant man but a terrible manager. And so Noyce bolted with the Treder estate and founded Fairchild Semiconductor and invented the integrated circuit. And then Noyce, years after that, goes and founds Intel and invents the microprocessors. These two things were of world historical impact. It changed everything. Our world today is 1000% different than it was when I was a boy, because of these inventions right here. And this begets more and more of this kind of activity. The Palo Alto Research Center invents all the things that basically became the undergirding of this online computer literacy world. This was all invented in Palo Alto, in the Stanford Industrial Park on land owned by Stanford. This is where this all happened. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak found Apple. Jobs worked for Hewlett Packard as his first job when he was 14. Wozniak worked for Hewlett Packard when they founded Apple. That's what they were doing together. So this whole thing comes from sort of the same well. And this is sort of phase one, which we might call the hardware phase of Silicon Valley. And then phase two, which occurred, a little later in the 90s and 2000s, the second big transformation was what we might call the software phase, although Apple is certainly primarily a hardware company, but it's the hardware software interface is what makes those devices so ubiquitous. But these things, all of them have tremendous economic impact. It changes everything. It changes the way Silicon Valley is in terms of its physical space and the impact it has on the world around it, and certainly the impact it has on San Francisco and Oakland, who are still there, sort of side by side, watching this all unfold at their feet. This is Silicon Valley today. This is just sort of a sampling of these brand names, which, all of us are familiar with some of these brand names. Many of us may not be familiar with some other of these brand names, but trust me on this, whether you know it or not, you use these products every day. We're using them right now, probably multiple ways, multiple channels. They're so embedded in the day-to-day activity of not just tech people, but everybody who uses a credit card, who watches movies online, anything. These companies are the ones who empower this and profit from it. So that the wealth creation is immense. And this is, of course, is the Valley of Heart's Delight here. This is where all those fruit trees were. This is what it looks like today. And so we have the Giants and the A's through all of this. How does this impact the Giants and the A's? I hope this slide is readable. I've had some complaints that the print is too small, and there's no doubt a valid complaint. I'll try to talk my way through it. This is a chart that shows the attendance of the Giants, which is this orange line here. That's the Giants attendance from 1958 forward. And what the line is showing is the rank within the league, right? So if the line here is up at the top, that would mean they led the league in attendance. And if the line is down, way down toward the bottom, it would mean they were last or nearly last in major leagues in attendance, right? So the Giants, when they moved to San Francisco and when Candlestick Park opens up, their attendance is fine. The Giants draw well. They weren't quite number one. We all know who number one was in attendance. It was the Dodgers, okay? But they were number two or close to it. The Giants were a very well-attended team until what happens in the late 60s. The A's arrive, and the A's immediately have the Giants' attendance. They take the same, total amount the Giants had and divide it by 2 is what the A's effectively did, in which an environment which neither team could thrive. The A's, were a great team, one of the greatest of all time. They won 3 straight World Series. They were as entertaining and as successful a team as you could possibly imagine. At best, their attendance was okay, league average at best. And meanwhile, the Giants, they just drove the Giants right out of town. The Giants were unable to compete with the A's, and their attendance cratered. And Horace Stoneham, the owner, was bankrupt, and he had to sell. And the Giants were this close to moving to Toronto in 1976. It was a story which we can go into later, but a miracle occurred, and Bob Lurie was able to buy the franchise at the last minute. The Giants' attendance rebounded, and the A's then, had their downfall. The A's almost immediately, because they fell apart because Charlie Finley, all the free agents left, and the A's went to the bottom of the league, and Finley stopped promoting. The A's attendance fell to the bottom. The A's, Finley tried multiple times to sell the A's to Marvin Davis, and he didn't get away with it because he wasn't able to break the Coliseum lease. The Oakland Coliseum, because they were his landlord, wouldn't let him break the lease without paying them, and he wasn't going to pay anybody. So the A's then, instead of moving to Denver, were purchased by the Haas family. And with Lurie buying the Giants and Haas buying the A's, both teams in the 1980s, for the first time ever, have at least periods of good attendance, although neither of them was able to sustain it. The A's in the late 80s peak with a great team, the Bash Brothers team, and great attendance. While the Giants were kind of, scuffling along. It was at this time when Lurie said, this is it, we have to get out of Candlestick, and tried to get a stadium built in downtown San Francisco, tried twice, 2 different ballot initiatives, both voted down, tried instead to move the Giants to Santa Clara, had a ballot initiative in Santa Clara that was voted down, and tried to move to San Jose, but the Giants intervened because of their territorial rights to San Jose, to Santa Clara County, and stopped it. So the Giants were unable to move. The Giants are purchased by Peter McGowan. He builds Pacific Bell Park, which changes everything, right? It's a complete game changer. From the worst ballpark in the world, the Giants are suddenly in the best, and the Giants enjoy great attendance through most of the time. You know, they had a great championship team in the 2010s. They had Barry Bonds. You know, they were a great team, wonderful attendance for most of the time. The A's, of course, had a moment there. Remember this time, the Moneyball era, the Billy Bean era. But even at that, you know, the best attendance they were getting was middle of the pack. And as soon as that team, because of the mismanagement of the ownership, was unable to sustain itself, the A's were trying to move. They've tried to move to Fremont. They've tried to move to San Jose. And finally, as we know, they are attempting to move to Las Vegas. We'll see how that turns out. This is just a listing of the many times the teams have attempted to relocate. It's just remarkable. You know, we don't think of this so much of in the history of Major League relocations. You know, the sort of the image we always have is the Dodgers move and Brooklyn is heartbroken, but the Dodgers, you know, strike it rich and live happily ever after in Los Angeles. That almost never happens. In virtually every other franchise relocation, you know, there may be temporary success as there was for the Giants, but sooner or later there's another problem. And both of the Giants and the A's, these relocated franchises in the first place, have attempted multiple times to relocate again out of the Bay Area. And yet here we are in 2024, they're still both in the Bay Area. So here we are with these three major economic centers in the Bay Area. San Francisco at one time was the biggest and the most powerful city in the Bay Area, but it's not close to either one of those anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. But it's still the most picturesque. It's still beautiful. It's still world renowned as a tourist destination, and rightly so. It's an absolutely lovely place to be. It's too damn expensive is the issue, of course, and that's the issue with the entire Bay Area. But San Francisco does have the Golden State Warriors, and does have, because of Pac-Bell Park, does have the Giants. Oakland has nothing. Oakland has lost all of its franchise in every sport. I'm pretty sure there's no other story like it in the United States. Oakland was never, you know, equal to San Francisco in any regard. Has always been sort of the second tier, you know, the backup plan. And at this point, it's just gotten boxed out by San Francisco's beauty and grandeur, boxed out by Silicon Valley's wealth and power. And Oakland it's a perfectly fine market. There's absolutely no reason why the A's couldn't thrive in Oakland, except we'll talk about, they have made zero effort to do so. Meanwhile, you've got San Jose and Silicon Valley, the Bay Area's biggest city. It's as rich a place as there is in the world. They have the San Jose Sharks for the downtown arena. They have the San Francisco 49ers who play in Santa Clara, my hometown. And they have the San Jose Earthquakes, the MLS team, has been there for 30 years, I think, 25 years anyway. But they don't have a Major League Baseball team. And while I'm not here to predict what will happen, it is not beyond the realm of possibility that what happens eventually is that some billionaire in Silicon Valley ponies up the money it would take to buy off the Giants' territorial rights to Silicon Valley and moves the A's or some other team, the Rays, some available team or expansion team to play in Silicon Valley. The Bay Area market is plenty big enough to support two teams, is plenty big enough. With the Giants in San Francisco and another team in San Jose, they would both, as they would with the A's in Oakland, they would both have more than enough economic might behind them to be successful for a long time. So those are my prepared slides. So with that, I would like to open up the floor to discussion. I think I saw somebody with a raised
We had one hand
earlier.
up, but you touched on something when it comes to Oakland versus San Francisco, and there's plenty of people in the area to be fans of both teams. And that's one of the things that John Fisher has held on to for years. There's not enough Oakland A's fans around. There's not enough people to come to this ballpark. But first off, you haven't given them enough reason to even think about going to the Coliseum to watch an A's game, because you keep telling them that the fans stink, the team stinks. The only reason to come here is to watch Aaron Judge. There's all sorts of wonderful things. But I want to, if you don't mind, Steve, I'm going to put somebody on the spot real quick here. Donna Muscarella, are you there?
I am.
Hello.
Hello.
Donna, you are my resident expert right now on the last week of the Oakland A's, where she got hat. Thank you, Donna.
You're
Because
welcome.
you were there. Tell me about Oakland A's fan, would you?
It was one of the most heartbreaking baseball things that I've ever seen because, as you said, John Fisher's full of it. Those fans had their hearts ripped out. They were some of the most passionate fans that I've ever encountered. And the reason they stopped going was because of John Fisher, not because of the team. Nobody said, oh, we don't come because the team stinks. They said, we don't come because we don't want to give John Fisher money. And to be sitting there and have 3 generations of families sharing stories. That's where I was when this. That's where, I mean, I'm like I'm welling up just thinking about it now. I mean, I have a dear friend who lives out there, and he still is not over it. We were supposed to meet up, and he said, "We're a wreck. We don't deserve you. We wouldn't be good company for you right now." And they didn't even want to meet up at the ballpark. Um, it yeah, and I don't know the source of this, but before I went out there, I read a lot about how it's going to be a terrible experience and the staff is miserable and security is miserable. They were almost, I would say they were number 2 behind Baltimore in terms of friendliness and helpfulness of stadium staff. The security was second to none. And in terms of friendliness, like they made you feel safe without flexing, if that makes sense. And I really, really, really hope that Rob Manfred gets his head out of his ass and kicks John Fisher the hell out of there and gives the fans what they deserve.
Not going to happen. We
I
know
know.
that. It's
I
not
know.
going to happen.
I know.
All right. So if you have a question or a comment for Steve Treder tonight, you know what to do. Go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button and then hit raise hand. And you get in line to talk to our presenter, Steve Treder tonight. I want to go to Alex Stace because he was first up. Alex, go.
I was at the penultimate game of the A's in Seattle. There were 3 A's fans there. So they weren't going to put money in John Fisher's pocket up here, and they weren't here. But second point quickly is that the size of the market is smaller, even if you add in San Jose, than Houston or Dallas and places that have one team. So I look at it differently, and I would say, what are the largest places that have 2 teams? And it's still not a big enough area. And thirdly, and most importantly, I think we need to talk about this Giants getting the rights to Santa Clara, or they didn't get the rights. The A's would be down there right now if they could have been. And there was some sort of side deal between the 2 owners that was very strange, and that the A's still say that it was contingent, that the Giants only got Santa Clara if they were moving there, and they never moved there. Anyway, MLB basically hoodwinked the A's out of San Jose, where they would be now, in my opinion. Is that fair, Steve?
I will address that. You're exactly right. One of the largest factors in all of this history since 1990 anyway is this territorial rights issue. And here's what happened. It's 1987, 88, 89. This period, Bob Lurie has made it public. It's no longer, just his wish. It's his stated agenda that he's trying to move the Giants out of Candlestick Park. First choice is San Francisco. He tries twice. He can't get there. So he says, look, I've nothing else I can do. I got to go to the South Bay. The South Bay is, eager to take him. And so territorial rights had been an issue for not many, but for several organizations around Major League Baseball. It had been an issue in Baltimore and Washington between the Orioles and the Senators, and other places where there are 2 teams sort of, not next door, but, sharing at least part of the same market. And so it was, I don't know whose original idea it was, but somebody came up with the idea. We need to make sure this is all clarified, right? In order to make sure that there's no reason for Santa Clara, San Jose to not, to not full-throatedly embrace this. We'll just make it clear that this territory belongs to the Giants. And so they signed a territorial agreement letter, which is, like, say, not unprecedented. It happens all the time. And it wasn't the old Haas. It was his son, Wally Haas, was the A's president at the time, and he was all for it. Remember, the A's are ascendant at this point. The A's are the top of the heap. The A's have the Bash brothers, and they're winning pennants, and their attendance is far, far greater than the Giants struggling at Candlestick Park. And the logic that everybody had is this is going to be a win-win. The A's are going to get San Francisco and Oakland to themselves. The Giants are going to move to the South Bay. This is great. Somebody should have, however, had the wisdom to say, but what if? What if somehow they don't move there? Then what do we do? Well, they didn't. And the Giants, of course, have this legal document in their hand. And they've ever since said, well, fine, but here we own the South Bay. And it's always it's just business. It's always never been anything other than all the Giants need is somebody to buy this off of them, pay them off, meet the Giants' price for this, and the Bay Area is yours. But of course, nobody's ever done that, and so the Giants have held it to their advantage ever since. The Giants don't, they don't sit in the South Bay, but they have a lot of the luxury suites have been sold to Silicon Valley people. San Francisco has become a tech hub where a lot of the San Francisco tech money is theirs. For their luxury boxes. The Giants, have won this round thoroughly. Ethics, whatever you think of it, but it's just business, and they boxed the A's out of the South Bay, and that's where it is today. Like I say, I think what ultimately will happen is it's going to be worth somebody's money to pay the Giants off and get a team into the South Bay. Alec, did you had a second question? I can't think.
Well, I was just pointing out that, people say, well, there's enough people for both teams, but
yeah. No,
your point,
I would turn your point on its head. What you're saying is that there's plenty of room in Houston for two teams. There's plenty of market potential there. The Major League Baseball is not suffering for revenue and profit. They're doing just fine, and they could have several more teams and still all be profitable. They're a cartel. They have a limited number of franchises sharing this market that keeps growing. Even Major League Baseball attendance and ratings is not what as it used to be in terms of compared to NBA and NFL. Doesn't matter. It's still big, and it's still big enough to make all of them money. And the Bay Area could absolutely support two teams, as well as, like I say, could Houston and New York could probably support 4 or 5. Those are the economics of it. Okay. Next question is
Ryan McClanahan. You're up.
Hi, Steve. This is really great. Thank you very much. So did you do any research into Charles O. Finley and his impact on the A's?
Oh, it's one of my favorites. I'd say it's one of my favorite chapters. It's one of my favorite several chapters because Finley owned the team through several fascinating adventures. Finley was, there's no superlatives that are strong enough to describe Finley in any way. Whatever there's superlative you think of 10 degrees further and you're almost there. He was brilliant as a baseball operator. He understood how to build a baseball team, how to gauge talent, how to maneuver trades and build a team. He was brilliant. He was his own general manager. He didn't hire somebody to do that. He did everything himself. Brilliant. He was Branch Rickey. He was George Weiss. He was all those guys. He was at that level of brilliance as a operator of a baseball team. In every other respect, he was unbearable. He was a terrible human being, awful to everyone around him. He was I could say he knew how to save money. He didn't know how to make money. He never marketed the A's at all the way they could have been and should have been. He wasn't a sophisticated businessman by any means. He made his money selling insurance. He was an insurance salesman. Who came up with a kind of a policy idea that he made millions with in the 50s about medical insurance. And so he didn't really understand anything other than selling and deals, but he didn't understand. He didn't hire a staff. He didn't hire, a marketing team, a front office. He did everything himself. And, eventually, of course, his problems ruined him. Nobody liked him, his players least of all. And so as soon as they had the chance with free agency, bam, they were all gone, and nobody was going to come to him as a free agent, and so he was basically out of business.
Is that why he's not in the? Oh, sorry. Is that why he's not in the Hall of Fame?
Well, he should be in the Hall of Fame purely as a general manager, but as an owner, he was a disaster. He was terrible in Kansas City. He was terrible in Oakland. He's ruinous to deal with. The Senator Stuart Symington in Kansas City the senator from Missouri, said when the A's moved from Kansas City to Oakland, Oakland is the luckiest city since Hiroshima. That
Ouch.
describes
Oh,
how they felt about Finley, and Finley proved him right. He was terrible for Oakland. He was terrible. He didn't get along with anybody. He was constantly at odds with the Coliseum. He never paid anybody, their bills. He didn't. The TV and radio coverage that the A's got was just minor league level. He was a terrible operator of the business of the A's. So perhaps, for that reason, he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame as an owner. As a history, if the Hall of Fame is a history museum, Charlie Finney deserves a wing, a hugely impactful, colorful, interesting, fascinating character, but a terrible person.
if you want to
Awesome.
learn a
Thank
little bit more about about the Finleys, go back into our YouTube channel and find the recording of our meeting with Nancy Finley, Carl's daughter, from last year. And she has a lot to say because she was there for a lot of the history. And it's a really, really interesting interview that she did. So I encourage you to go back and look at that. Will Highland, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thanks for
You are
asking.
up.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Bruce. And thank you, Bruce, for arranging this. I mean, you arrange a lot of great guests, but Steve, this is one of my favorite ones.
Thank you, Will.
I think one thing that I want to ask is, you're a West Coast guy. You grew up in the Bay Area, grew up a Giants fan, and I think I'm on the opposite coast. I've been to California once, and it was to Oracle Park. It was awesome, but I think on the East Coast we have a lot of East Coast bias. Like we'll point out what we would do with a particular city that we've never been to because it's on the other side of the country, and we don't really we'll talk about French Canada, or we'll talk about Florida and what should happen in Tampa. But I think what happened in Oakland for a lot of young fans like myself still went over our head. So I think we have a lot of East Coast bias, and I think your experience of growing up there and seeing it in the presentation you laid out might help me with this question too. But did you ever compare and contrast some of the hardships of the Bay Area with some similar situations in baseball? Because like I brought up the Expos leaving Montreal. That's the only other one that's happened in my life. And I think about them going to Washington, D.C., which has a population, I think, of about 8 million now, but back then it was probably less. And Baltimore together, those two cities. Did you compare and contrast with those at all? Or did you solely focus on California and the economics? Because I think DC's kind of exploded with some population too, as a result of similar economic conditions. Did you compare and contrast with that?
Thank you, Will. I can't help but do so in telling the narrative, because so many times through the history of the Giants and the A's, when one or the other team has been about to move, well, then that brings, okay, why are they moving there? What's going on there? What's happening with other teams in the major league system that would make this new location? The Giants were going to move to Tampa. Well, Tampa got a team. And there's always this musical chairs of which franchise is going to go to which market. And over time, every 20 years or whatever, through the later part of the 20th century, Major League Baseball would expand, right? They just add just a few more markets to make the cartel a little bit less exclusive, but to a little bit closer approximate the true scale of the market that they're serving. But they are a cartel. They do have an unusual relationship to the markets that they draw from. Yes, the experience of the Bay Area with the Giants and the A's both coming, and then both in the sort of transitional point, is something that's happened in other places as well. Like I say, the relocation phase of Major League Baseball started in the 1950s, but by no means did it end there, right? That was just the first chef's moves on the board, and they've been reverberating ever since. We live currently in a current era of relative stability. with franchise movement. But in, through the 50s and 60s and 70s, of course, it was rampant. And then there was another shuffling around with the expos and the nationals. But that was what, 15 years ago now? It's been a while.
Almost
05?
2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that,
04,
that's
yeah.
that was one of the things that struck me is, I was thinking as you were going through and you brought up the Raiders leaving and the Warriors have moved across the bay, and I thought about the Baltimore Colts, and then, the Orioles have, were the original Yankees and all of that happened, and I thought, well, when the Expos went to Washington, D.C., that must have maybe Baltimore fans felt that was a shot across the bow.
They
Similar
did.
to some other places. I know, Bruce, you're a Orioles fan, so I think, yeah, that's why I wanted to ask that question, because it seems like it's just a constant thing, and we're always going to be talking about it. They're always going to be talking about the Rays or the Expos. I mean, Quebec City is always talked about in the NHL.
It's one of the cards that major league organizations play, not just baseball. The NBA and the NHL, they all do it. They don't want to saturate their market. They always want there to be at least one or two prime targets, right? That, if you don't give me my new stadium, I might move to what's currently now Portland, Nashville, there's always a next market that we're going to move to. And so all the leagues do it. And it's part of their business model that they don't just rationally place a franchise in every market at a proportional level to what the market can bear. That's how they would operate if they were a unified corporation, but they're not. They're a cartel of independently motivated individual actors. And it's a weird, you don't see this in many other business operations other than pro sports.
I think you're going to see a new era of franchise shifting over the next 10 years. You're starting to see rumblings of teams wanting to give it another go. We see the White Sox have put themselves up for sale, and Dave Stewart's group is interested in them. Dave Stewart was part of a group that was trying to bring a franchise to Nashville. He has since left that group and is now trying to buy a major league team. And the Twins are for sale as well. I don't think we're talking about Oakland and San Francisco here. I don't think Oakland ever plays an inning in Sacramento. I think that's going to blow up in their faces because the union hasn't approved it yet.
But if that's the case, where are they going to play?
That's a good question.
Oakland is done. Oakland is done with them. I mean, it is vitriolic. John Fisher is not welcome at Oakland, and so Oakland is off the table.
If I were him, I wouldn't.
Any other team, they would be happy to talk, but not the A's.
Yeah, like maybe the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, or the Tampa Bay. I call them the Devil Rays to this day. Maybe
wouldn't that be poetic justice?
Wouldn't that be poetic justice? Alex Stays had a good comment to start this meeting. They could call them the Rays, R-A''S. I thought that was great. Gary Mids had his hand up. Gary is the head of the New York Giants Preservation Society and has a fantastic group. If you haven't seen some of his meetings on YouTube, go out to youtube.com and search his group and see some of the presentations he has because they're great. Gary, how you doing tonight?
Great, Bruce. Thanks for your hospitality on inviting our group tonight. I see some of the members are here, so sorry for the getting in a few minutes late. Steve,
hi, Gary.
To see you again, and great presentation. I have a question for you, and I guess it would be Donna. So the Giants moved from New York to San Francisco, and they have a built-in hero, Willie Mays. So a lot of New Yorkers, I'm too young, but somebody like my father, continued rooting for the Giants despite them being 3,000 miles away. I don't see anybody remotely on the Oakland A's that Donna would be rooting for the team that would leave Oakland to go to, say, Las Vegas and continue rooting for the Vegas because one of their players is okay. Nobody's going to be in the class of Willie Mays. But Donna, do you and Steve feel that since there will be no hero like that you could see yourself rooting for the Giants, or what are you guys going to be doing?
Well, for the record, I'm from the East Coast. I'm a Yankee fan. I just went out to Oakland for the last
Okay.
6 games because I wanted to witness history. But what I heard, they're done. Their team is the Oakland A's, not the A's. It's the Oakland A's, and they are done. And a lot of them haven't decided who their team is going to be.
The dynamic between the Giants and the A's fans changed dramatically once the Giants built the new ballpark downtown.
Mhm.
Back in the day, remember how different things were in the 80s? It was the Giants in Candlestick who were the plucky little, poor man's team. And it was the A's who had the big stars in the more modern stadium who were who were sort of the fair weather fans that the plucky guys looked down on. That all changed and changed irrevocably once the Giants got the big new stadium, and the Giants fanship changed, right? All those hardcore fans from back to Candlestick, after a few years, they couldn't afford to go to Pac Bell or whatever it's called now, Oracle, not Oracle, what is it? Oracle, I guess.
Oracle.
They've changed the name so many times. So the Giants fans are the effete, Chardonnay sipping elites, who are always on their phone and never know what's happening in the game. The A's fans, ever since certainly the Billy Bean era, A's fans are the most knowledgeable, passionate, truly there for the game experience kind of fans, and they identify as Oakland, not the Giants. The Giants fans like me, we're generous. Fine, the A's are fine. A's fans don't feel the same way about the Giants. A's fans are prickly about the Giants. The Giants are not who we are. We're Oakland. We're the underdog. We're the working class. We're the people who aren't Silicon Valley millionaires and San Francisco superstars. We're real people. That's their image. That certainly was the Raiders' image. And so they are not happy about, I'll just go to Giants games instead. A few will, but most won't. It's a bad thing for Major League Baseball. They've just poisoned. My mom and dad were Oaks fans. This fandom has been going on for more than 100 years. Oakland baseball fans, and it's just gone, just thrown away. Not important. It's a terrible. The victim in all of this is Oakland A's fans. They get nothing. They get no quid pro quo. It's a total loss for them.
Gentlemen, thank you again for having us.
Gary, you've written a book about this in your fandom of the San Francisco Giants. Plug that book for me. What's the title of it?
Yeah, it's Baseball from 3,000 Miles Away. It's the story of me trying to follow a team from New York as a kid in 1969 up until the present day, and all of the great games I went to, family dynamics, and most of all, the communication, the technology that has changed, that now I could watch a game with a snap of my finger, where in the past I had to rely on, a newspaper that said Giants against Houston. You'd see the N next to it, meaning night game, and you couldn't know the score. So there was just a lot of, I had a great time writing it. And even though I wrote it last November, the story continues. The Giants invited me out for speak about the book, and then I was invited to Willie Mays' Celebration of Life. So
and Gary spoke about that book with us.
It's been a lot of fun.
And Gary spoke about that book with us, and we really appreciated him coming in one night to discuss that. It's a great book. It's on Amazon, and I believe you can download it to your Kindle lickety split. So if you get a chance, go out to Amazon and take a look at that. Dixie Tarango, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Gus has
up,
put on a nice show tonight. Steve, a great presentation. I'm sorry I missed it in Minnesota, but at conventions, sometimes you have to make tough decisions. But I want you to know that I don't know how many people on the screen were thinking the same thing I was as I was watching the first 10 minutes or so. But I want to thank you for giving us the information foundation about the area. I'm from the East Coast. Yes. I don't know squat about out there. So don't ever think that because it's not about baseball, that first 10 minutes, that it's not important, because it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's music to my ears. Because I sort of take all this for granted. Everybody knows this. Well, no, everybody doesn't know this. Everybody didn't grow up here like you did, dummy. You need to explain it to people. And that's the whole theme of my book is the story of the Giants and the A's, their exploits on the field, and their business issues with attendance in ballparks, within the context of how it, where it occurred. Place matters. These are real places, and they have impacts on the real communities and businesses around them, and they are impacted in turn by them. So it's placing the baseball that we all know about within the bigger whole. That's what I'm attempting to achieve with the whole piece. So thank you for that. That's really good to hear.
That was very well said, Dixie. This has been a fantastic discussion. Anything else for Steve tonight? All right. Well, next week, Monday, October 21st, we will have fellow SABR member David Simmons with us to give his SABR 52 presentation entitled Harry Simmons, So You Think You Know Baseball. The meeting begins at 7 p.m. Eastern. All baseball fans are welcome, and the sign-up link is in the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Steve Treder, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this.
My great pleasure. Thank you all. I really had a great time.
This is great. Well, let's get everybody out of here. We'll see you Monday night. Have a good night, everybody.